News First, Newsline Prime with Faraz Shaukatali.
And a very good evening to you. This is Newsline Prime, live as always from the News First studios in Doss Street in Colombo. And this evening the messages have already started coming in. And you can of course send messages to the studio right through to me on 0772 300 305. Our guest this evening is a man who knows a thing or two about the greatest financial scam ever perpetrated on the public of this country ever since independence. That description isn't mine. It's a description that was made, an observation that was made by none other than the Attorney General's Department in what is now the infamous Bondgate scam. And he's right here with us, author and amongst several other things, including being the first person to write about the Bond book, is Mr. Rusiripala Faraz. Very good evening to you, Mr. Rusiripala, after a very long time on our program.
Yes. Good evening to you.
Very good evening. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Compliments of the season to you from all of us at Team News First.
Thank you.
And of course, Mr. Rusiripala, you arrive here because once again, public concern has reached unacceptable levels, and that is to do with the infamous Bond scam.
Yes.
Now, the most recent update on that, of course, is the release on bail, exceptional bail being granted to Ms. Arjuna Aloysius and to Kasumpali Sena, also on exceptional grounds, after 10 months in remand. What does this all mean?
Yes. You know, it was a stale affair. We saw it for some time. Not a very active thing.
Yeah.
But then that staleness increased a bit because, you know, of the release of these two people who were in remand.
Yeah.
They were the only accused who were taken into custody so far.
Yeah.
When the main person who was wanted for this is now living as fugitive in Singapore, and no attempt is being made by the authorities to bring him back to Sri Lanka, or to produce him before courts, or to promote him to come and then put an end to this state of affairs. So in that context, you know, everything was a very stale affair. And then things became worse with the release of these two people, and people have started now suspecting what is going to happen to this in the end.
Of course, there are several aspects of this. One, of course, is that it almost beggars belief that Arjuna Mahendran was actually permitted to leave this country whilst a Presidential Commission of Inquiry was sitting into this whole matter.
Yes.
Notwithstanding the fact that he did give answers to the Commission. But they ought to really have devised some mechanism. I don't know how, but that's up to the Attorney General's Department. They ought to have devised a system where he would be, at least have his travel documents, you know, his travel ban put on him. But none of this has happened. And in one particular important case or scenario, when it was raised in Parliament that he had gone, the Prime Minister, no less, got up in Parliament and said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's gone for a wedding, he'll be back. And he's not done a runner like your other people, like Jalia and Udang Wiratunga and so on."
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's fine. But that was, to me, that was a red herring. Because whilst the public got used, and the legal fraternity got used to the fact that Mahendran was going at the weekends and coming back on Monday, this was a build-up to what would eventually be a one-way, no immediate return journey to Singapore.
Yes. Yes.
And this country is left in lurch. But Mr. Rusiripala, what I can't understand is this. Now, that is one of the reasons that they've mentioned in this bail business, that you can't carry on waiting forever to arrest this man. In the same breath, why can't they charge him ex parte?
Yeah, I mean, if one really wants to deal with it for us in a proper way, it could have been done. unfortunately, what we saw, what you and I saw,
Yeah.
is not starting from, by allowing him to go leave the country.
Yeah.
From the day the scam became known, public,
Yeah.
he was covered up properly and truly by the people who were responsible for that state of affairs.
That's right. I mean,
That is what happened.
Yes.
A statement was made no other place other than the parliament,
yes.
exculpating him from all the accusations that were leveled against him. When things were so obvious, when things were so visible, when things were known, still people, the Prime Minister himself,
I'm glad you
being
said that. I was about to say be specific.
the minister as the minister in charge of the subject, and the person who appointed him, who brought him down to be appointed as the governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and who took upon himself the responsibility of appointing him to that position, despite several protests by people who claimed at that time appointing a non-citizen of the country to that such an important position in this country would lead to some kind of confusion in the future. And that has happened. And he didn't care. From that time, you can see, if you trace the events that took place, one after the other, it was a total, complete coverage that was given to him. So this is the continuation of the same thing. In fact, when I wrote my book, Faraz, I wrote a para there. I concluded one para by saying, well, things have come to light this much, but we cannot expect this to conclude in the way that the people of this country expect it to happen. I wrote
I'm still hoping
yes,
that your words are not as prophetic as it sounds.
That's my wish as well,
yes,
although I wrote it.
Yes.
But then I was compelled to write it that way,
because
watching the developments.
Yeah.
Watching the development. I have never ever seen another incident or event in this country, a fraud in this country, that has been covered up so well, so authentically, with so much of patronage by the higher-ups. I never ever seen.
And I will always remember the Prime Minister's insistence right from the beginning.
Yes.
He said there's nothing that can be done because there's no evidence of wrongdoing. No evidence of wrongdoing.
Yeah.
He went the extra mile to cover up for Arjuna Mahendran. I'd like to know from him now, Mr. Prime Minister, why don't you tell us what you feel about it now that you've had the Presidential Commission of Inquiry? Why don't you instruct the Attorney General's Department, because you're in the habit of instructing all sorts of people, why don't you instruct the Attorney General's Department to pursue a case against Arjuna Mahendran on an ex parte basis? Why not? You know you're never going to have him here in this country. That's wishful thinking. Don't you think? Isn't that wishful thinking?
The implications that we saw of Arjuna Mahendran in this affair, was completely covered up by the Prime Minister in his statement that he made to the Parliament. That statement, when it came, the question came before the Commission at the inquiry. The commissioners were compelled to make a statement and say that the Prime Minister should have, before making that statement, verified things for himself before making that statement. I mean, that is the extent to which he was responsible for what he did. Finally, they were also trying to sort of give him a little leeway by saying that privilege patronage, by stating that somebody like Samara Siri or somebody has misled him. I mean, if the Prime Minister and the Minister in charge of the subject has been misled, he has misled the others by this misleading.
All right, Mr. Rusiripala, let me put it to you like this.
Yes.
Let's say you were misled in February, March 2015.
Yes.
Then, how come you let it happen all over again in March 2016?
At least after the Commission of Inquiry findings, he should have been wiser. What happened was, he was determined not to give in or not to hand over the responsibility or attribute the responsibility to Arjuna Mahendran. He was trying to do that from the very beginning. By making a statement in the parliament, he showed it very clearly that that was his intention, and he covered it. Not only that, after the first bond scam, when the term of office of this person ended, he wanted to reappoint him. Exactly. What does that mean? He didn't care a tuppence of what the public opinion was or what he has done.
And sadly, I want to say this. I was driving past the central bank 2 days ago, and I took a photograph, and it actually made me puke, and that's why I took a photograph. Because up there on the railings was a poster with Ranil Wickramasinghe's photograph and Mangala Samaravira's photograph. And it was some form of appreciation of the return of Ranil Wickramasinghe as Prime Minister. But to have it on the railings of the central bank, to me, was as good as the Prime Minister and his team sticking 2 fingers up at the public. I think, I'm sorry to say, but that's what it is. Now about Mr. Rusiripala. So we had the Pitibena Committee, which is all of sham, complete sham.
Yes.
Then we had the statement on the 17th of March 2015 by the Prime Minister, who looked around his colleagues in Parliament and wanted to know who knows about bonds.
The difference between James
Bond and bonds. Right? So, okay, that was there. And then we had the kid glove treatment. We had the first COPE committee on the day that Diogo Sekra, as the chairman of that COPE committee, was going to hand it over to the Speaker Chamal Rajapaksa. The government, this parliament was dissolved. Then they came back again. Then there was the footnotes. Remember the footnotes? Right? There was Poor Sajiva got involved in writing a book. Right, and that chap was merrily misled as well, probably. He won't accept that, but that's what it seemed to be.
Yes, I mean, they had their role to play, and they have been well rewarded.
Well, yes, because you found people with checks being given to them, and I think one account in one of the banks, 1.2 billion or 1.3 billion rupees, right? And some of those checks being cashed by politicians.
Drivers and security personnel. You see, and all these came to light. I think this is the biggest scam that gave, that was, I mean, we got almost all the information we required to know, the country required to know behind the thing, but no action was taken. I mean, this is the only thing you can see. This Arjuna Mahendran was allowed to continue in his seat without any disturbance, not even sending him on compulsory leave. When the matter came to light, and when the whole parliament, several parliamentarians gave notice of a motion, which was included in the order book of the parliament, asking for the immediate removal of Arjuna Mahendran. What happened? When that was pending, the speaker then at that time said, no, we are going to appoint a COPE committee and we will inquire into it. What happened to the COPE committee? The COPE committee submitted the report. On the 26th of June, it had to be tabled in Parliament. That midnight, the Parliament was dissolved. What more do you expect? What more do you expect? That is the extent to which the people responsible for the scam prevented the rogues being prosecuted. What more do you need? So you are now talking about allowing Arjuna Mahendran to run away. Arjuna Mahendran from day one was allowed to be free, scot-free from the accusations. If that is what you want to know. That is, he was completely, exonerated by the Prime Minister in his speech. that he made on the 17th of March 2015 in Parliament.
That's right. He said, I insisted.
Yeah.
I insisted. I mean, if you want, we can play the clip, but we've played it so long, for so many times.
Yes.
You know, I insisted on the change.
Yeah.
And Arjuna Mahendran told the COPE committee that all he did was to follow the Prime Minister's instructions. And the Presidential Commission made a little note too. They said there is no evidence to suggest that the Prime Minister asked Arjuna Mahendran to break any rules.
Yeah.
I think that was a little bit too much.
I think they went beyond their scope to
beyond the
extra mile to give a bit of a relief to the Prime Minister. Because you know, they did not have to say all that. When a direction is given by the Prime Minister as the minister in charge, you know, you don't have to go and justify, attribute various other motives into that as to how it is to be implemented by the person who receives the directive.
Indeed.
The fact is that he gave the directive, and it is that directive that was responsible for this entire scam. You know, if not for the Prime Minister asking and ordering this person or directing this person to change the system in the way that he had it in his mind, this fraud and the scam should not have happened in this way, would not have happened.
And the Auditor General said that the method that the Prime Minister chose was not the least cost methodology.
Most expensive method.
Indeed it
most risky method to the central bank. Most unwanted method for the central bank. Most despised method by the central bankers who were running the show at that time. They had different alternate means of safeguarding the public monies and ensuring the issue of bonds at a reasonable rate.
Indeed.
Reasonable rate. And that entire thing was disturbed by this directive of the Prime Minister. And who is taking the responsibility today? You don't need Arjuna Mahendran to be expiated for this, you know. What we want is, what did the minister in charge of the subject who was responsible for this, who held him responsible for this? Could the Parliament do anything with that? They couldn't do anything. There was no debate on the Commission report. The debate was put off. By whom? By people like Mr. Sumandiram, Honorable the MP. He wanted a Tamil translation to go ahead with the debate.
Although he now says that he wanted the Tamil translation of the Presifact report and not of this.
I mean, he is trying to justify what he did, you know, at that time. But what he did in effect was to put off the debate, to prevent a debate.
I want to ask you this. We had Malik Samaravikrama, another known confidant of Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Yes.
Right? Unelected, came through on the national list. And whose presence at that infamous breakfast meeting at the central bank has never been properly explained, apart from to say that he was an advisor to the Prime Minister. On what? He had no experience on bonds. Anyway, I want to ask you this. He said in the press, Thamba Satayak Padu Name Rati. Okay? Now this is the guy who said not a red cent has been lost to this country as a result of this scam. Right. Well, I don't think he called it a scam. Anyway, my question is this. They, as in he and his mate, Ranil Wickremesinghe, also known as the Prime Minister, they both said that we've got about 12 billion rupees in the central bank that technically belongs to Perpetual, and that will cover up for the losses.
I
want to ask you this question very quickly. Don't forget what you're going to tell me, but what I want to ask you is this. What about the interest payments?
You leave the interest alone.
Right.
You just listen to what the Commission had to say about the loss in this case. They said, in their own words, the damage is grave and not quantifiable. What more explanation do you want? A commission of inquiry consisting of judges, retired judges and active judges who are in service, they have in their concluding remarks,
2 serving Supreme Court
judges, they have said the damage is grave and is not quantifiable. It's so much. Therefore, they have ordered forensic audits. They wanted beyond what the Auditor General found and determined at that time. They wanted it to be examined for the future, the futuristic part of the loss, which has never been determined in this case, which will be a huge amount, which we cannot even imagine. Now, who is responsible for this? And they also said they are of the view that it has caused substantial damage to the reputation of the country and the central bank.
Reputational damage to the central bank. Isn't that sad?
Yeah, you see. I mean, what more? What more do you expect about this? The minister should have resigned then and there on these statements alone. On these statements alone. Shameless thing. It never happened in this country. You are talking of democracy, you are talking of good governance, you are talking of good practices. Is this what is included in the good practices and the good governance that they announce and that they want to follow? This is rubbish, I should say. They talk one thing, they preach one thing, they do something else. Here is an example where they should have set an example to this country in the name of democracy, in the name of ethics, in the name of good behavior. Here we take the responsibility for what we did. Because this is a damage that is done to the reputation of a country, reputation of an institute. An institute, nothing other than the central bank of a country, a reserve bank of a country, which has to borrow on behalf of the government from other sources, find the monies for the government to run. And if that reputation is damaged, where will the economy go? Where will we head? Who is going to take that responsibility? It's a shameless thing, Faraz. From any standard, I am saying, it's a shameless thing to have happened in this country. More than the incident, the people who are involved, their behavior, their conduct, their attempts to suppress it, these are very despicable acts.
These are all from so-called Democrats. I call them pseudo-Democrats. Here we go. These are some questions that the public have posed.
Yeah.
The bond scam is a well-organized financial crime. Arjuna Mahendran was used for this, knowing that he is a Singapore citizen who cannot be summoned by any other country or entity. So asking the PM to instruct would not solve the problem. The President must take immediate legal action, and he does have the power. Do not fool us. One day we will stand up.
Faraz, I mean, in answering to that question,
yes,
you know, the President has been advised by the legal authorities in this country that there are certain lapses and loopholes in the existing laws to punish these people.
Like what?
You know, I mean, the law is not clear on this. So therefore, they wanted to formulate certain...
yes, to be able to use that evidence from the Presidential Commission.
Exactly. And when they passed regulations, when they passed that draft act and gave it to the Parliament, it was lying there. It was made to lie there for months.
So it shows...
When the question was asked from the Speaker, it came up, it was tabled, and the debate was put off indefinitely. Who is answerable to this? Who has to answer to this? That gentleman should know that that is the extent to which they have gone, even suppressing the legal approach to this.
Unofficial reports say the loss to the country due to the bond scam is 1 trillion rupees. Please ask your guest, who was a former banker, whether that figure is correct.
I think that figure has to be revised now in the context of the dollar going up. This must have been the figure when the dollar was 140 rupees or 130 rupees. It may be very much more, and it will be much more in time to come.
Now then, Mr. Rusiripala, because I'm so fed up of this whole thing, but we can't be fed up because we have to keep going on.
Yes.
We have to go on. We are not going to stop. And in that context, do you seriously think, now that there's an election coming up, and do you remember all this money Range Bandar is talking about so much of money, everybody's talking about so much of money. Do you think that this bond money is what has been fueling all this?
I think I have no doubt whatsoever that the bond money was used for the election in August 2015. But now, judging from what is happening in the government and the interferences and the influences that we feel are being exercised by certain unseen forces, there is very much more important sources for them to have monies for their expenditures. I mean, those are the external forces that govern the affairs of this country, that control the affairs of this country. Most unfortunate situation. Therefore, putting everything on the bond money is something, I think we are going up the garden path. It's unfair. It's not that. Then we have very much more many other sources that the government has access to, because there are certain forces in the world, internationally interested parties, who will want people like this to continue the governing of this country. Therefore, they are ready to spend monies. They have been doing it. When you see the amounts that they have spent, they seem to be spending, it is doubtful whether the bond money is sufficient to do that. It goes very much beyond. No doubt that the bond money played an important role in the 2018 election, 2015 August election, because that was a time when UNP was in the opposition for about 17 years and came.
It doesn't make it any better, does it?
Yes, they came and they had no way to spend so much of monies for an election. They had to find something. Somebody had written to you and said that this was a planned thing. Yes, it was planned. You know that meeting that you were referring to in the central bank, attended by Malik Samaravikrama and two other, Kabir Hashim and other ministers, and to go and create a picture that they wanted urgently some money to pay for the highways contractors. The minister in charge of the highways was there, a party to that meeting. These were all part of the game. You know, when the Treasury sent a certain requirement on the 20th of February 2015, that we only need 13.5 billion as expenditure for money for the month of March in this country. These people had to create a situation for want of more monies. Therefore, that meeting was set up, where Kabir Hashim, Malik Samaravikrama and others participated. Unsolicited meeting.
Do you think we should jail them all?
I mean, they are all responsible for the creation of this situation. And it is that one that Arjuna Mahendran used when he walked into the auction floor. When the officers had prepared a report to accept only 2.6 billion, only, out of 20 billion received. It is that point of that meeting, arising out of that unauthorized meeting, that was used as a ruse by Arjuna Mahendran to tell the officers of the central bank, this money that you are recommending is not sufficient, go for the entire 20 billion.
And thanks to Mrs. Senavi Ratna, it was only 10 billion.
I mean, they argued.
And she made a note.
Azim and Senavi Ratna and all these officials in the central bank, I mean, with due respect to them, as noble countrymen of this country, you know, they stopped it and they reduced it to 10 billion. And she made a note that we are taking this 10 billion because the governor insisted that it should be at least 10 billion. This is how it happened. So, is there any doubt that this was a planned thing?
And is there any doubt as to who is the main person who should hold responsibility, moral and otherwise? Rusiripala Faraz, thank you very much. We'll leave you with a clip and you make your mind up as to who should be held responsible. On that note, take care, have a great evening, good night and God bless.
Thank you.
I insisted on a public auction because private placements have led to corruption and lack of transparency. Previously, parcels of government bonds were handed out to selected individuals on a favored basis through a system of private placement. It took place outside the normal auctions of government bonds.
News First, Newsline Prime.